Hey, everybody. Welcome to our interview sessions for the Bellevue Democrats and the Davidson County Democrats. We have Jacob Kleinrock today with Triumph Strategies. He's going to talk to us about campaign finance, contributions, PACs, things we want to know about that subject. Our interview sessions are made to educate voters and educate the general public on who does what and how it's done, and kind of how things get done within campaigns. So welcome, Jacob. He's with Triumph Strategies. And start off by telling us what you do at Triumph.
Sure. Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am the principal at Triumph Strategies, and we are a political and primarily fundraising consulting firm. And so we help candidates, organizations, nonprofits raise money for their cause. And we do that through a few ways, primarily call time, which is where a candidate or a nonprofit executive will make phone calls to their previous donors, current donors, potential donors, and ask them for money. We also do events, fundraisers, meet and greets, the whole 9 yards when it comes to both Zoom and soon in-person events. And then we also do some email marketing for our clients, where we write and send their fundraising emails and do a little bit of other kind of digital email or digital fundraising as well. And occasionally we even do snail mail letters. We just did one snail mail fundraising piece for a client last week, which actually still works. Surprisingly, people do still, get mail and send checks back. So anything that has to do with money for a campaign is kind of what we do.
Okay, so you work with nonprofits as well. That's interesting. Do most people that do what you do work with different groups, or are there some that are specifically that work with just political candidates or just nonprofits, or what do you do other companies do compared to yours?
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot more people who work just in the nonprofit world. I don't think there's that many that do both political and nonprofit. I mean, even for us, we're probably 90% political, 10% nonprofit. So we're really focused on the political side of things and kind of political associated nonprofits in some ways too. And there's in Nashville, there's not a whole ton of other people that do the kind of work that we do, but nationwide, there's some that do both politics and nonprofit, but I'd say a lot kind of go in one direction or the other.
Awesome. Yeah, because I know you've worked with a lot of candidates over the last years, and I know some upcoming candidates that you're going to be working for. So if you want to run for office, you need somebody like Triumph, right, to do this for you.
Well, I'd say that you do, but you don't necessarily have to. A lot of people do it themselves. Self-funders. If you have the money and the time to be able to put your own money into a campaign, then you don't need anybody like me to help you along the way. Which, more power to you if you can afford to spend, tens, hundreds, millions of dollars on your own campaign, then that's good for you. But most people have to raise money for their campaigns, and oftentimes people will try to do it themselves. Which can work, especially if you have good volunteers around you that are able to kind of help guide you along. The comparison that I often like to make for the work that we do is that even though they call people like me fundraisers, it's really kind of a misnomer, because you don't hire us and expect, okay, I never have to think about fundraising again. They're going to raise our money and I can focus on doing everything else that I want to do. Really, the comparison is more like a personal trainer relationship, because, a personal trainer isn't going to get you that six-pack on their own and you're not going to have to do anything. You're going to have to do a lot of work to get it, and they kind of help you, guide you along the way and give you the tools that you need in order to be successful in your goals. And that's the same kind of thing that we do. So we work with you in with your personal network, thinking about who in your network are good potential donors. We work with you to think about who has donated maybe to people running for the office that you're running for in the past, or other offices nearby. We think through, go all the way back through your Rolodex to people you went to high school with, college with, people in your fraternity, sorority, people you go to church with, synagogue with, whatever. I mean, there's lots of different ways that we can dive in and try to raise money from your personal network before we even move into kind of the traditional Democratic donors in the world. And so that's it's definitely kind of a hand holding kind of a thing. What I often like to say is my number one job is to annoy you in order to get you to do what you need to do in order to, raise the money for the campaign. And sometimes that's just sitting in front of you and making sure, hey, did you call this person? Did you do that? And then kind of the way that it usually works is once you make the calls and make the asks, we kind of take it from there and we follow up with everybody, and we make sure, people who want to host events get dates and get invitations and things like that. We track all of the pledges. You would be surprised how many people make a pledge or commit to donate to you, and then without consistent follow-up, they never actually make that donation. And so we kind of help track all that. We're very organized, and we are the entity that kind of helps you stay organized and you raise the money to be most successful in your campaign.
Now, what would be the difference between what you do and someone who, grassroots campaigning is the new buzzword now. Everybody wants grassroots fundraising. What's the difference?
That's a great question. So there's two ways about grassroots fundraising, and the main one is, big presidential campaigns, things that people are really paying attention to, like Bernie Sanders was kind of the first who really did grassroots campaigning well. And then in the most recent election cycles, we saw a lot of it in Georgia in the Senate runoffs for Ossoff and Warnock. And, Stacey Abrams' campaign was a great example of it. And that's kind of, big picture, national, like everybody knows who you are. These are the ones that can send out text messages or emails. You do Facebook posts and raise millions and millions of dollars that way. If you're running for a city council, that's not going to happen for you. If you're running for pretty much anything in Tennessee, that's probably not going to happen for you in like that big way. And so when I think of grassroots fundraising, I think of it as like kind of a lower dollar fundraising, and people who might be giving you $5, $10, $25, et cetera. And that's really kind of focused in the email program, which is what we work with candidates on. And so those are the, sometimes annoying fundraising email blasts that you get that, go to everybody that's in their personal network and any email address that gets added from their website or things like that. And those are the, hey, we have a big deadline coming up. Can you give $25 before midnight tonight kind of a thing? And so we do that side for the grassroots fundraising locally. But as far as, organic grassroots fundraising, it's really hard unless you're, a high profile national figure to kind of get that attention.
Gotcha. So grassroots is on a small scale. You're wanting more small donations, but you've got to have a larger, more people that know you to give.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of the bigger the email list that you have is, the more low dollar grassroots money that you'll be able to raise. There's a pretty direct correlation between number of email addresses in your database and amount of money that you raise from those contacts.
So once you start sending everything in, say on a local race, say in Davidson County, you start bringing in money for a candidate, where does that money go?
That is not up to me. I like to be very clear. There's some people who do the kind of work that I do where they're like holistic, and they come in and they'll manage your campaign, and they'll do your volunteer work, and they'll make your mail pieces, and they'll do your digital ads, and they'll make your TV ads, and they'll kind of do everything. Where I like to draw our line is we bring the money in, and we don't tell you how to spend it. That's up to your campaign manager or your consulting team or whatever. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, so I like to be a part of those conversations. And, if you're going to try to go and, put up a billboard or something like that, I'm going to say, I don't think that's a very good idea, because that's not going to get you very many votes. But the types of things that people will spend their money on are other campaign staff, direct voter outreach, which is, getting volunteers or paid staff to knock on doors and to drop literature that you've paid to print out, paying for mail pieces, paying for digital ads, paying for TV ads. Those are kind of the big buckets that most campaigns will be spending money on. You can also pay for like text message outreach. You can pay for paid phones, where you have live people who are making phone calls on your campaign's behalf that are being paid. There's volunteer phone banks that you can kind of pay to have an auto dialer that'll only connect you with people who actually pick up the phone. And there's a million different things that you can spend your money on, but I like to let the campaign team figure out how they want to spend the money, and I focus on the raising of the money.
Now, do you do, or would you filter money that comes in from maybe somebody that you don't want to take money from? Do you ever have that happen? I mean, how do you deal with that?
So it's pretty clear that's illegal. So no, you can't really fudge around who is making a contribution. So it's illegal to have somebody give somebody else money to make a contribution to the campaign. It's illegal to like force somebody who works for you to make a contribution to a campaign. You can't like give your assistant $1,000 bonus, but then they're expected to make that contribution to a campaign. That's illegal. So there's really, the cash contribution limit is $50, and so you could take $50 from somebody and not report who it is. And then other contributions over $100 in Tennessee have to be reported. So sometimes you'll see people make a $99 contribution because they don't want to show up on a disclosure report, that's totally legal. But you can't like go out and get a sack full of $20,000 in cash and like not report where it's coming from. There's really no way around that, unless you could create a state PAC, but the state PACs also have to report where the money's coming from. So, you can make an extra step in somebody trying to look into it, but it's really on the state level in, direct voter contact and direct, help to campaigns, more than $100, you really aren't allowed to, fudge who's making those contributions.
How many times can you donate $99?
Just once per election. So it aggregates what your limit is. And so you give $99, you could give $99 in the primary and then wait for the general election and do another $99. So I guess technically you could give $198 anonymously, but it's per election.
So you could give in the primary and then the general election if they win the primary.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then what is the individual contribution that you can give?
So it depends on the race. For in Tennessee, for local races and legislative races, the limit is $1,600 per person per election. So the primary and the general are separate elections. So really it's $3,200. For a statewide race, like a governor's race, they just changed the limit. I think it's $4,100 now per person per election. It might be $4,200. We haven't had a governor's race in a little while, so I'm not 100% sure exactly what it is. It was 4,000, but they periodically raise the numbers to go along with inflation.
Do you get notified, I guess?
Yeah, you can go to the Tennessee Registry of Election Finance website, which is a really helpful website for any potential candidates. And they have an FAQ page that you can download a sheet that has the contribution limits. There's also different contribution limits for political action committees and for political party committees. And so they have kind of a graph that shows you, what office are you running for and what entity can give you what amount.
So what about the next races coming up here are our county judge races? So what is the limit on those?
So that limit is $1,600.
Okay.
And those are primaries. It's a primary in May and then a general election in August. So technically,
You can
somebody
donate twice.
Yeah. Now, most of those in Davidson County, at least, very rarely do Republicans even ever field candidates for those judicial races. So more likely than not, for most of these judicial races, their elections are going to be done in May because they probably won't have a Republican opponent in August. Some of them might, but if they do, very rarely do the Republicans actually mount much of a campaign.
Yeah.
Because Davidson
So,
County, pretty blue
so
county.
how much can these PACs give? Because I'm wondering how do they get how do they get so much money? How do candidates get in the state and national elections get so much money given to them if you can't give but this much in election?
Yeah.
Can they draw money from a PAC?
So PACs can make larger contributions in Tennessee for sure. The PAC limit is $8,300 per election per PAC. So it's $16,600. Now the $8,300 is different if you're in the Senate or in the House. But they're all kind of around there. So it's certainly a lot more than what an individual can do. And there are a few PACs out there that will write the full amount that they're able to give to, Republicans in leadership. But there's not a lot that will write a $16,000 check to anybody, even, a Republican in leadership. And so, but there's a lot of PACs out there that write a lot of checks. And so, that's an easy way for a lot of incumbents to, especially a lot of Republican incumbents, to raise, a big bulk of the money that they raise. On the federal side, it's harder. The federal PAC limit is only $5,000 per election. And, if you're running for US Senate, you have to raise $10 million at least, really, for a competitive US Senate election, sometimes more. Jamie Harrison raised $100 million in South Carolina last year. So, there's a lot more money that you need to raise that just isn't going to come from PACs for those elections. I mean, most of the money that those federal campaigns raise, both Democrats and Republicans, come from individuals. A very low percentage of it is coming from, evil PACs that are out there that are going to take over the world. Now, there are super PACs, which can be involved in both state races and federal races, more often in federal races. And they do not have to disclose their donors in the same way. They can take unlimited amounts of money. And so they're able to kind of compile a lot of money from other entities and then spend on behalf of other candidates as well. And so, that's kind of a way that some of them can get around. But if you saw, Jamie Harrison raised $100 million, that does not count any super PACs. That's only from individuals or state or federal PACs. And so, the federal contribution limit is different from the state contribution limit. So the state individual contribution limit is $1,600 per election. The federal one is $2,900 per election. And so they're able to take a little bit more money for federal races than for state races. But I mean, if you're going to raise $100 million, you have to have a whole lot of people that are going to be donating that money to your campaign. That's not coming from, big evil corporate PACs or anything like that.
Yeah. So PACs raise money on their own, correct?
Yes. PACs.
And can anybody give to them? And is there a limit to giving to a PAC?
So it depends on the PAC, and it depends on if it's a state or a federal PAC. For a state PAC, there is no contribution limit. You can donate however much you want. It can be corporate money, individual money, no rules as far as that goes, and anybody can donate to it. There are more rules for federal PACs. An individual can only give $5,000 a year to a PAC. Some PACs have rules for who can donate to it. Some don't. I'm not really clear on the federal regulations on who can give to what, because I'm really focused on mostly Tennessee races. But there's, some corporate PACs can only be funded by employees of the corporation at a certain level. There's some weird rules in the federal PAC world about who can give what, but in the state, it's really anything. There's not a whole lot of rules when it comes to PACs in Tennessee.
So what do PACs are? Why are they formed? Are they formed to give money to candidates, or can they, like, I had asked you before we went on, how can they pay lobbyists to lobby the legislature?
Sure, a PAC could pay a lobbyist. Most entities that hire lobbyists do so not through their PAC, just through kind of their corporation. That's kind of the more common way to do it. But I mean, a PAC could. A PAC can do really whatever it wants to. But so a PAC can spend their money directly on candidates by writing a check up to $8,300 to a candidate if it wants to. It can also do independent expenditures on behalf of a campaign or in opposition to another campaign if they want to. And so that's where you see a lot of, negative attack ads that come from PACs. Those are state PACs. Like if you noticed in Heidi Campbell's race last election cycle, most of the really negative, nasty TV ads were paid for by an entity called MCPAC. And who knows what MCPAC is. Now, if you dive into it, you find out that MCPAC is Randy McNally, the lieutenant governor's political action committee. And so anything that's paid for by MCPAC is authorized by him, and he's the one kind of controlling the strings there. But it's, better for him not to have his actual name associated with these nasty attack ads that are coming out from there. And so they put it under MCPAC instead. And so that's in a big way how some of these PACs like to get around, exactly who is funding what. Because if you create a PAC and you come up with a name for it that's like not directly associated with you, and if you choose somebody else to be the treasurer, there's really no way for anybody to know that that's you that's controlling that money going to wherever it's going. So other than these PACs do have to report where they've raised their money from, just like a campaign has to report that. And so if you look at a PAC's disclosure report and you see, for instance, maybe MCPAC got $100,000 transfer from Randy McNally's campaign committee, then you kind of know, okay, it's probably associated with that guy. So there's ways that you can look at the disclosures, but it's a good way to kind of be secretive about what attacks or support you're giving to campaigns.
Right. Do you think that should be the case? I mean, I think it should be pretty easy to find out who is owning these PACs and spending this money, especially to put out attack ads.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there should be a lot more clarity there about who's doing what. I mean, our entire election finance program needs to be completely overhauled and changed. I mean, as long as Democrats are in the super minority, that's never going to happen. I mean, I think that right now it's important for us to play by the rules that are written. I mean, I don't think that we can afford to go out and be the good guys in this and not have Democratic PACs that are doing the same kind of thing, because we'll just keep getting slaughtered that way. If the Republicans are going to play by these rules that are, I mean, they're not breaking the law in this instance. If they're going to play by these rules, I think we have to play by them too and do the same kind of stuff. Otherwise, we're never going to win. But in an ideal world, yeah, there would be a whole lot more restrictions and a whole lot more kind of oversight for a lot of these things too.
So going on with that, what are some of the changes that you think need to happen?
That's a great question, and I don't really know. I think that they're probably in Tennessee, at least. Federal rules are. I mean, there's so much that needs to happen in federal races. I mean, we need to reverse Citizens United and get rid of super PACs altogether. It'd be great to, I think, get rid of corporate PACs in general, probably, and just let it be kind of individual money that goes into campaigns. In the state, same kind of thing. I don't think that corporations should be allowed to donate to campaigns or to PACs. The interesting thing, the big difference between state PACs and federal PACs is state PACs can accept money directly from corporations. So if if Target created a state PAC, I don't even know if Target has a state PAC in Tennessee, but if they did, they don't need to go to their employees and ask them to donate from their hard-earned paychecks to the PAC to fund it. They can just write a big check from Target into Target Tennessee PAC and fund whatever they want to from there. I think it's harder for not necessarily hard, but harder when corporations have to get their employees to proactively donate to their PACs in order to fund them, which is what happens on the federal side.
So did the super PAC come out of Citizens United?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it really gained most of the power that it has now from there. There were things kind of like super PACs before then, but Citizens United really let them go crazy.
Yeah. So what else? What other areas? Do you think the donation limit should be more or less? Do you think it should be more individual contribution?
I think it's interesting. Some states, Tennessee's probably in the lower part of contribution limits nationally. Some states like Virginia have unlimited contribution amounts that individuals can give to campaigns, which seems probably too high. But I think we are on the lower end. I think it would make sense to kind of be in line with the federal limits, which are $2,900. And maybe that's a little high. Maybe we should be $2,000, $2,500, something like that. But I do think $1,600 is a little bit low compared to what a lot of other states are doing and what federal campaigns are doing.
So finance rules vary state to state.
Yes, very much so. So
That
there's
sounds like a lot, by a lot.
Yeah, each state makes up their own rules for their state and local races. Now, federal races all have the same rules. So if you're running for Congress, Senate, or president, you all have the same rules that you have to follow. But every state makes up their own rules for state legislative, gubernatorial, and local elections too. And so, yeah, it really is state by state.
Interesting. What else? What else do we need to know about the finance?
Oh my God, I could go on for forever.
So what we're trying to get to is we all want to blame the big bad super PAC, like you were saying. We want to blame them for instance, all these horrible transgender bills that were spit throughout the country. They had to come from somewhere. When every state's trying to pass the same thing.
Yeah. What's interesting though is that that's not coming from these super PACs. I mean, it's coming from some of the same funders as the super PAC. So in some ways you could say that they're related, but I mean, all those are coming from ALEC and the Heritage Foundation and these like far right think tanks. And I mean, all these state legislatures are just copying and pasting the same legislation and putting it into their own formats in their states. And that's why we're seeing, the critical race theory legislation and the transgender legislation in, 20 different states all at the same time. Is because they're getting this guidance from these national Republican organizations that are just, they're just giving them the legislation and saying, here, go and run this bill. And then, these Republicans in the state legislatures are just saying, okay, I'll do that. Sure. That sounds like it's taking away people's rights. Cool. I'm into that.
Right.
And so,
so they're not really PACs. They are just organizations that are formed to push agendas.
Yeah, exactly.
Are they and they incorporate?
A lot of the funders are the same. I mean, the Koch brothers fund these think tanks, and the Koch brother, well, I guess one of the Koch brothers died. So whichever one is still alive funds these think tanks, and they also fund super PACs too. So, they're kind of related, but the super PACs on the state level aren't really as involved. They're a lot more federal than they are state. I mean, I would love to say that like the Koch brothers are the reason we have a supermajority Republican legislature in Tennessee, but I don't think that's true. I think that, if you look at these disclosure reports for these, for the Republicans, they're getting their money from regular people and some state PACs. But, in the ones in competitive races, they're getting their money from people like you and me. but Republicans. So, I don't know. And that's probably not what a lot of people want to hear, but I don't think that on the state and local level, the Koch brothers are in there like getting people elected. They're doing terrible stuff once these people are elected, no question about that. But as far as the actual elections, for the most part, I think they're raising their money the same way that Democrats are, except they're getting bigger PAC checks because they're in the supermajority and because they think they're going to win. And so that's like, it's almost, the chicken and the egg kind of a thing, which came first because, they're raising a lot of money because they're in the majority. They're staying in the majority because they're raising a lot of money. And so it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because there's nothing that we can necessarily do to convince these corporate PACs or other big, powerful entities in the state why they should give more of their money to Democrats, because the Democrats don't have any power in the legislature right now.
Gotcha. So a Democratic PAC might give less in states where they're not the majority.
Well, yeah, Democratic candidates would get less in states where they're not the majority.
I see. So where the Republican PACs would give the most, where they have the majority, they're going to give the most they can give.
Yeah, well, a lot of PACs, a lot of the corporate PACs at least, will give both to Democrats and Republicans. But for instance, use that Target PAC, for example, in Tennessee, they would give a lot more money to Republicans than they would give to Democrats because the Republicans are in the supermajority. So
I see.
They gave every Democrat $500. They might be giving every Republican $5,000. So, because they'll play both sides of the aisle, but
like your Target example, your Target PAC would probably give to both.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
most of those like big corporate PACs will give to both sides. Now, if you have a state PAC that is very partisan, for example, then they're just going to give to one or the other. But in Tennessee, the Democratic PACs oftentimes have a lot less money than the Republican PACs. If you look at the House, the state House and the state Senate Democratic caucuses, they raise a lot less money than the Republican House caucus and the Republican Senate caucus, because a lot of the Republican caucus money comes from these corporate PACs. And so they're spending more money with the Republicans than they are with the Democrats. So it's all kind of a cycle.
Yeah. But do you think it would make a difference if say a Democratic PAC spent more on Democratic candidates, even in a state like Tennessee? I mean, you can always use more money. To me, and you need more money in the places you're not in the majority.
Exactly. And that's why, from your lips to the DNC's ears, right? I mean, the national Democrats need to spend more money in quote unquote red states like Tennessee if we're ever going to get out of the super minority and win back the state legislature. California is a very Democratic state. That's awesome. Good for them. The DNC shouldn't be spending any money in California. They should be spending it in the places that need to be won back. And I think they are in a lot of ways. Like there's some states with legislatures that are very close to being flipped. I think like Michigan and maybe Iowa, Pennsylvania. There's a few states that have, they're like 51% Republican, 49% Democrat. And the national Democrats are spending a whole lot of money in those states to try to flip those legislatures, which I get. I mean, that's a big deal. These legislatures control redistricting. It's really important to control an entire legislature, but that's not the only place they should be focused. They should be focused in these deep red states like Tennessee and helping us fight our way out of the super minority where we are right now. So at least we could have a seat at the table and be a part of the conversation. Right now, in the next few weeks, few months, the Republicans will get the data for redistricting from the 2020 census, and they don't have to tell the Democrats anything about it. They're going to draw these lines, state legislative lines and congressional lines, however they want to. I mean, there'll be some internal squabbling amongst themselves about what they're going to do, but they don't have to talk to any Democrat about any of it because they have the governor's seat and they have a supermajority in the House and the Senate. So they can hold on to those maps, they can draw them, they can sit on them as long as they want to. And then, unless they're really blatantly illegal, then the Democrats could challenge them in the courts. But as far as, these initial maps that come out, we have no power at all. And so we have got to get some help getting out of the super minority, so that in the future we can have a seat at the table and be, a part of the conversation. We just saw in Texas last week, the Democrats had enough people to walk out of the legislature so that they lost the quorum and they couldn't have their voting rights vote. Voting rights repeal, basically vote, which is great. We couldn't do that. If all the Democrats left the Tennessee legislature, the Republicans would still have a quorum and would still be able to pass whatever they wanted to do. So, we have got to pick up some more seats so that we can start doing some of these tricks that, we're seeing our fellow Democrats do elsewhere.
How much is the DNC saying to us? Well, you need to show us something before we give more. You know what I'm saying? How much do they try to blame the state and local parties? Because that would be easy to do too. They'd be like, well, you're getting beat up so badly, you must not be doing something right.
Yeah, another self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. I really have no idea how those conversations with the DNC are, and it's not just the DNC, it's the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, it's Emily's List, it's the Democratic Governors Association, it's all these like DC entities that I think should be focusing more on red states than they already are, and hopefully that will change sometime soon.
Well, good deal. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck, and I'm sure we'll see you as these judge races pop up and people start focusing on running. So what's the date on that election? Do you know?
May 3rd, I believe.
May 3rd. So our next election is May 3rd, judges race. And county, tell us what the county contribution is again.
$1,600 per person per election.
Okay. So county and state is $1,600. So you can at least give $1,600 to your favorite candidate in the local and state races. So, all right. Thanks, Jacob. And I loved hearing about Triumph, and we'll get back with you soon again and see how it's going. And have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Lee. And let's go and elect some Democrats.
Let's do it. All right.
All right.
Bye.